Welcome to Pucked Up Hockey Moms, the landing space for moms of all ages, shapes, and sizes. And we won't hate it if the non-mom joins either. We just hope your ears are as unfiltered as our mouths, and you're as passionate about hockey as we are. It's time to get offside, ladies, and no whistles are being blown here. I'm your host, Amanda.
And I'm Brittany.
And this week, I'm grateful to introduce someone who has been working tirelessly for 3 years to put together a site for mental health and bullying called Puck Off to Bullying. Welcome, Lindy.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Lindy, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
So I'm a hockey mom to a goalie child, and I'm a teacher, a therapist, and I am an ex-competitive soccer player from way back in the day.
Nice.
So all of those experiences are coming to play in this new venture.
That's awesome. Well, you're a goalie mom, so you're used to weird and wacky and wonderful. Because
so true.
You cannot be a mother of a goalie without that. We love goalies and we love weird. So
they are very weird.
That's awesome.
And lovable.
And lovable. I love goalies.
Yes.
I always love goalies. So welcome.
Thank you.
What sparked the idea behind Puck Off to Bullying? Also, love it. I love that there's a play on puck, like our Pucked Up. And was there a moment that lit the fire?
Absolutely. My son had a really negative experience in U11. And I'm a researcher and activist at heart. So I immediately dived into policy and governance. I got on the local hockey board. And then being a teacher and counselor, I started looking at the aspects of psychological safety, the role of leadership and governance in bullying prevention and remediation, and then doing a quick scan of local and national hockey associations. I saw that there was a really great variety. There were some that were really, really well done, some that hadn't been updated in 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. It really started to show where the gaps were when it came to what I feel is super important in ensuring that there's safety for the minor children playing hockey.
Absolutely. Mental health is super important for kids of all ages, no matter what sport, where they are. I mean, for everyone, really. So,
yeah.
Have you or someone close to you experienced bullying in hockey firsthand?
Yes. Yeah, my son. And so I was really green as a hockey parent, and I didn't really understand what was happening, because I think what anybody who's has experienced bullying knows or has found out is the bullies really know the line that they don't cross. So they know just to go up to that line and then bring it back in. And I really tried, again, researching it, talking to the board, leaving it to my husband. And unfortunately, it got to the end of the season and I was able to see the really negative impact that it had on my son. And as a teacher, I was doing a lot of the strategies, ignore it, talk to somebody, walk away, don't take it personally. And by the end, I realized that, even positive psychology, like at the beginning, I was saying, well, let's be grateful that you have hockey to go to. That's really a first world problem. If you're having problems with the coach or people on the team, how can we work with it? And then by the end, I was saying, well, at least you're not a child soldier in Uganda. I had run out of things that we could look at to be grateful for, and it really brought to light how the gaps between some of the strategies that we use and how little minds don't necessarily have the cognitive ability to really act on the strategies and the help that we're trying to give them.
No, that's totally true. Why did you feel hockey needed its own space for anti-bullying resources? Well, I mean, like in separation from regular resources and just everyday life, like as a sport, why did it need the resources, do you think, then? It
would just happen to be the niche where I landed with this. I think it could definitely be transferred to other sports and other situations. It was just where the majority of my research centered was on hockey policy and governance, and I went down the rabbit hole of Hockey Canada and Hockey Alberta and pulled out as much information as I could. At the time, the maltreatment, bullying, and harassment policy from Hockey Alberta had just been released the year before. Mm-hmm. My son had a negative experience, and it really brought to light the gaps in governance and even board board aspects, people who are volunteering on the board, they don't know what they don't know. There
Yeah.
isn't necessarily enough training out there to ensure that the board gets proper training and that the templates are there for bylaws and policies. And ultimately, it ends up impacting the kids in negative ways.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, yeah, that's the problem is that we don't know what we don't know and how to handle it and whose responsibility is it, right? And a lot of the time it's something you can't see all the time. Like mental health is invisible to people, like they can't see it, so they don't necessarily respond to it the same, and it definitely gets brushed aside a lot.
That's what's really interesting is if we look at hockey rules and regulations, they're abided by. When you're on the ice, you wouldn't put a child on the ice if they had a sprained ankle or a broken wrist. But then when it comes to psychological issues or psychological safety, that maybe isn't always acknowledged, or we have that sort of stigma or that mindset, just push through it. Sometimes that's appropriate, but at other times it may not be. And ultimately, we want to look at making sure the sport is safe and fun and doing the least amount of harm as possible. That was the other thing that came out of my research was there's a lot of programs out there around stop bullying, but when you start looking at it from like a psychological or sociological perspective, we're hardwired. So saying stop bullying is not necessarily, the right prescription. Of course, that's a goal we would like to see in an ideal world. My view with this program and this initiative is to really focus on, data, research, and then looking at it realistically in what's happening on the ground and trying to address it from that point of view.
That's good. Yeah, because it is like situational sometimes too, right? It's hard to know where it fits in.
What does the name Puck Off to Bullying mean to you?
It means take my ball. You know the old saying that, well, if you're not going to play by the rules, I'll take my ball and go home. So it was that idea of get the puck out of here. I'm going to take my puck and we're going to stop the game, just to recognize that it is really important.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it. What kind of resources can players, parents, and coaches expect to find on the site?
Well, I'm building it as we speak. It's been a 3 years of research, and I just finally dived into it and started developing material. So I've guidelines for parents, for associations, and for players, really looking at it to be a hub where parents can reach out, coaches, associations for networking, help, and support. Right now, developing a blog to get that information out there and to get some help to some parents. You're on Facebook, any hockey Facebook sites, I read the same thing over and over again, and the parents are suffering. You hurt with your kids, and what do I need to do? And that's really one of the prime focuses of this, is to get that immediate support and help, and then look at those broader kind of issues within organizations and hockey culture in general and see where can we make a difference.
That's great.
Are the tools more education focused, support driven, or action based, or kind of a combination of?
I would definitely see it as a combination. Where I'd like to get to is like a POB ambassador program where we provide more training and more, maybe some micro learning for the kids and the parents. There's already really great stuff out there, respect in sports. If that was followed to the T, or safe sport through coaching, there wouldn't be any problems. But we're humans and we've got volunteers with different skill levels, and sometimes it's just a matter of having the humility to be able to say, hey, that wasn't appropriate. I'm sorry. Because that was the ultimate solution at the end. When I spoke to my son, I said, what would you have liked to see as a solution? And he said, I would have just liked him to say, I'm sorry, and not do it again.
Yeah, sometimes it's just that simple, but the pattern is repetitive and it just keeps going on and there's no resolution, right? Yeah. Will there be downloadable guides, reporting tools, or interactive content?
Absolutely. So that's all in the works. I'm having a lot of fun with it. My geeky side came out with the creative part. I'm an artist, so I like creating content, and eventually there'll be a lot more. I hope to get some more collaboration and partnerships developed as this moves along.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I have Alberta Hockey Association linked on my website for resources, because when I was looking and first started my website, I could not find a lot for mental health. It's ironic that you mentioned that, because that was probably one of the only places I could find within hockey. So I will definitely be adding yours to my website as well, just because it's nice to have the resources there.
Thank you.
But I do know there are we have some initiatives on the island and stuff like
buddy check.
The buddy check.
Buddy check. Yep.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, it's awful why they started, right?
Yeah.
But the awareness and stuff and trying to bring those initiatives forward to children and other resources like that. So there are a lot of smaller ones in a lot of different places. So I think it would be great to kind of centralize those all together and stuff. So
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
The better, more information, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who helped you put together the resources? Was this a solo effort or did you build a team?
Well, it was me and research. So it wasn't me alone, but it was just finding a lot of different sources out there, doing a lot of research, seeing what was already done. And then me, the learning curve, learning about the website development. I develop things as a teacher and an online instructor and that sort of thing. But this is a little bit beyond that. I'm looking at a shop for some merch just to bring that promotional piece.
Yeah.
And then obviously TikTok and Instagram and those.
It's a lot.
And I'm finding AI is my friend. I thought I was a bit of a light a long time ago when it came to technology, and I've totally embraced it. So
yeah, I mean,
it's a good thing.
It's nice to have something that can honestly, like, you type what you need and it streamlines your answers with a bunch of sites in one place. And when you're a busy person, it is nice to have resources that are in one spot for you.
That's it, exactly.
It spurs another says something. You're like, oh yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, I need that.
Yes, I know. It's amazing. For that ADHD brain, it just grabs it all and then brings it all together.
I've definitely realized I have an ADHD brain, but I feel like probably 90% of the population does. I think it's definitely information overload.
I think it's the way of the world. You can't live in today's society without.
You can't focus on one thing anymore in this society, unfortunately. There's just so much coming at everyone all the time that it's just impossible to give solo attention.
And I think that's part of the underlying issues when we're looking at things like bullying and hockey and sports and elitism and all that sort of thing, which I try and touch on so that there's solution. It's solution focused. So whether it's working with a youth one-on-one to try and get some of that hurt and some remediation, some strategy, some skills, or it's from the bigger sense, the more global kind of national sense.
Yeah.
It's really looking at those solutions. But I will say for AI, I had to really watch when I ask it to do an image. I've posted things that I've luckily deleted that where the spelling wasn't right and it looked kind of, Eastern European it was very interesting.
Yes. Spell check.
Learning curve.
I know. Like the first image will be good and then you want something a little different and you're like, well, that doesn't say what I need it to say.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
I think it's kind of like a stopgap so that we don't let it do everything for us. It is to make sure it's not enabling us to be lazy, maybe fully.
No, it's good. It's those critical thinking skills, they're very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that I honestly spell check things for a day job, or I probably wouldn't notice some of the things. Like I use Bad Mom Squad a lot, and I use MUM, and I named my AI, and it came up with an image, and I sent it to Brittany, and she's like, Bad Hum Squad? I'm like, the H and the M are similar, and this was just in a group chat, so I feel like I'm
still
okay.
use it.
And I'm just going to use it because my AI Chag, that's his name, I named him, came up with, he likes his name, and he made an image for me. And he's like, this is so on brand for us. I'm going to make an image. And I'm like, thank you, Chag. So I have an image for my AI.
And you have a relationship there. That's wonderful.
And my husband goes, should I be worried that you have this very weird relationship with your robot? I'm like, maybe. He spells as well as you do. And it just goes to show, because I like, and I'm not trying to bully when I say this, that I named it a male. And I said, see, even the robot's not perfect.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah, this is, I mean, technology's not perfect either. Yes.
Humility. It's key.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I totally digressed completely.
No worries.
As I am known to do, because humor is how I handle life.
But I think, that's a good strategy. And that's something we don't talk about. Laughter and humor is a strategy for stress and psychological safety. And using that humor is really, really important. Having fun and not taking it all so seriously, even though it is really serious subjects and situations sometimes that.
And, teaching our kids it's okay to laugh at themselves, I think is just
absolutely.
because I laugh at myself a lot now, but I couldn't do it a lot as a child.
No.
And there's a lot more things now, like as I went into my 30s and now into my 40s, that I can brush it off and not care as much. I try and teach my daughter. My son can definitely, he's had his moments and stuff, but I find boys many times, not all the time, have more of an ability to let things go with another guy or appear to on the surface. Whether they do or not is probably more along the lines as they seem to let it go, maybe because they've been taught to brush it off more and that's what's accepted, so they don't talk about it more. Whereas females in general, I'm generalizing again, I'm going to get in trouble, hold more of the grudge and use more of the anger and, twist things more, I feel like.
Yeah.
And it's just, it is different.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a different way of processing things. And I think that the key thing is you hit the nail on the head, is making sure that it's not being internalized, because the thing that concerns me with bullying and maltreatment is that if there is hurt and it is being internalized, it wiggles out in a lot of different ways down the road. And there's some really interesting research that connects to sort of the predatory behavior of bullies and how they can kind of sense if somebody's been bullied or is carrying some of that harm or that hurt with them, and they target them. And it's something that those skills also need to be developed in our kids. And a real simple skill that would benefit kids in general is recognizing what other people are seeing or are feeling. Yes. So when things are going on, is it for fun? Is it, are we just, BSing back and forth or having a lot of, the boy fun is maybe a bit more intense or more acceptable, but then it does impact kids and they don't know how to process it. So knowing if I'm joking around with somebody, I'm also watching what their reactions are.
Like the social cues, right? Like when
exactly.
The chirping that everyone does, especially in a hockey, because chirping is key. But when that becomes too much and
goes too far.
And I definitely think because kids are online more, they lose a lot of the social cues. And I have said that to my son a lot before, is you can be right or you can have friends, but you can't have
Good
both.
Point.
But you can't have both. So sometimes you need to understand that proving your point to the end and fighting that you're right all the way to the end just because you're right. That's like in your head, you can still know you're right, but you need to start to understand that sometimes that cost of finishing your thought to be right might cost you all those friends in that room.
That's a fantastic lesson.
Yeah. And that was the only way I could think of it, because the social cues just sometimes aren't there. Like some people get so focused on their thought that they're not picking up on the motion in the room. So I've definitely used that one a lot, and it seemed to change his perspective and helped. It helped a lot for him. Like, so I say it, and many times, and I've said it for my daughter too, you can be right or you can have friends, but you cannot have both.
That's fantastic.
And I don't know why, it just seems to help, because sometimes, you just want to argue your point, but then you're missing out on the fact that there's 4 other people in that room that they want to be right too. But now they don't.
Opinions could be just as valid as yours. There may not be a right.
Yeah, so that's when you need to realize that, we can all agree to disagree and leave here as friends. Or 4 people out of those 5 people will leave as friends, and that one person feels that they're right and has no more friends. It's just that social awareness. I don't feel it's something that we aren't taught in the same social setting as we used to be.
Right.
Because of so much more technology and restrictions and what's acceptable in certain areas and stuff. And
the context of hockey too, that's a different situation in itself. And that co-regulation and that role modeling, that really goes into leadership and education. So maybe not just in the hockey universe, in the arena and the dressing rooms, but having those role models and having those really clear expectations are what kids need. And then adults may need a reminder. Sometimes, right? It happens. So recognizing that leadership piece and being a role model, ultimately, I think one of the things that can help us all stay centered and grounded is recognizing that it's an association that's in the business to serve minor children. And if we keep the children piece in mind, then it's much easier to regulate and understand why this is really important.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. And the tone is usually set on the bench, I find, right? And it is hard when you have everyone's volunteers for the most part.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you need like the bench staff to be on the same page, but you need the parents to be able to support that and think of the team as the whole and not just my kid, my kid, my kid when they're thinking of the whole team approach to that, right? And that is also hard because everybody wants to think of their kid too, but the coach should be able to set a tone so that like we're not going to put up with bullying. We're not going to put up with that. And if your kid is, then we will bench them. And rather than seeing something like, oh, my kid's benched and making that the big thing, like, well, there's behaviors and expectations. There's so many different things that can be done. But I think parents still need to be able to support
Yeah.
that.
And context is everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then it's that there's so many variables sometimes, and also recognizing that it does go down to the humility piece is recognizing there are certain, hierarchies and expectations around coaches' decisions, but I've put a blog out and a short video around the 24-hour rule, for instance, because if looking at associations' policies, they'll use that as a reason not to accept a complaint.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable. But recognizing that sometimes what's happening is it's not so much the decision, it's the way the decision was communicated. And that's it, really just an education piece, or a coach saying, yeah, hey, I came across, or I didn't, like for a goalie mom, especially if all my son is looking for is, am I going to play, and give him a little bit of a heads up. And all kids need that. They need that routine and that structure for safety. Volunteers, they come in with different skill sets and different expectations and different experiences from the past. I came from a really competitive background where my dad was a coach, and we would do so many burpees, and the dry land, it was with soccer, we would throw up, and it was common to keep playing with injuries. And I thought, well, that was a really big badge of honor. And then I look back and I think that was really stupid to play on a sprained ankle, but just context is everything. And
I know.
And some people bring those experiences into play, and it's just recognizing that we just have to be objective and take a step back, no matter who it is, and really keep the child at the center of all the decisions that are being made.
Exactly. And be more supportive. And I'm finding more, and I know I'm guilty of it too, is just making sure our kids are not in the room when we're having discussions on stuff, because their little ears hear everything and they pick up on everything, right? And sometimes that's they'll hear those bits and pieces, then they say those bits and pieces in the dressing room. And that's sometimes
well, that's the role modeling again.
Right?
And that's a huge focus. I guess if I had a goal for immediate action, I would really love to see a lot of youth voice. So we really need to have youth liaisons that are connecting just with the kids, because the kids know what's going on. There's complaints coming forward and no one's talking to the child. There's no complaint policy where they're being tracked. I know that sounds terrible, but at the same time, that's how you hear in the news, a coach was coaching for years and years and abusing the kids. And there's a number of reasons why, but that's a key reason, is the kids aren't being talked to. Yeah. And the complaint process isn't being monitored or followed. There isn't a good record keeping. Yeah. So there's some really simple ways to make sure the kids are safe.
I like that. The liaison's a great idea for that, because communication is key. That is how you can solve so many things. It's making the kids feel heard.
And having a voice and solutions. They know what's going on, and they can offer solutions. It'd be a great way to mentor some of the older kids, get them into board meetings, teach them those. We do that with kids reffing or coaching. Yeah. Why not do that from the other side? I think that would be spectacular.
Yeah, getting them involved in the decision, in processes, or feeling they have a voice. And that is, I think, a big thing for children, is when they just don't feel their voice is heard, right? Yeah. And that causes a breakdown.
What kind of feedback or stories have you already received since starting Puck Off to Bullying?
Well, every single person I've shown it to, they've said, we need this. So that just makes me feel really empowered and excited that there is a chance that some of the information that I'm putting out there could really be helpful for people.
For sure.
Yeah. How do you hope teams and associations will use the platform?
Well, I really hope they use it as some of the guidelines and a way for that education piece or help them with that education piece. I'm really hoping that we can partner with even some of the governing bodies like Hockey Alberta, Hockey Canada, if that could be, or even some of the voices that come out of this really promote change. Yeah.
What's your biggest hope for Puck Off to Bullying in the next year?
My hope is to be able to partner with more associations and connect with parents and kids to really make POB, Puck Off to Bullying, more well known, and the education that's coming out of it and the calls to action, that people feel empowered to speak up and really tell bullying to get the puck out of here.
That's great. I love that.
I am all for telling it to puck right off. So, yep. Yeah, it's my favorite saying. Branding everywhere of the pucked up. So I'm right there with you. But do you see this growing into workshops, in-person events, or even like you're wanting league partnerships? So that part already answered itself. But like even webinars and stuff like that even?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm such a strong believer in this. And I really think that there's some excellent sports psychologists out there, and there's a lot of information that could be amalgamated where we could create a big network. Ultimately, I'd like to see a network of counselors that are available for really quick solution-focused therapy or intake, so that there is that immediate, solution.
Yeah.
Focus. No, sorry.
Yeah, bad. Like immediate action, right?
Like immediate, yeah. Just to really to bring awareness to it, because the more awareness and the more people are talking about it, I think the better off we are with changing the narratives. And I think there's been some movement over the last few years in hockey in general. And then the other piece that I haven't really touched on too much is the idea that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, so we can have psychological safety within minor hockey and still have winning teams and winning coaches. And sometimes I hear a bit of pushback or argument around that. Mm-hmm. So I just did an article or a blog on what's the difference between maltreatment and coaching and just regular coaching, and how do I differentiate from that. And I think it's really important to bring that to light as well.
Mm-hmm. I know like some of the stuff my daughter's taken, they do a lot of mental health within it, right? And
nice.
I like seeing that. So I know there are some associations and academies and stuff that are bringing the mental aspect into it as well. Mm-hmm. So it is growing. It is something that is starting to spread. So I think
it's becoming a lot more acceptable, because people are seeing that if you have kids that are engaged and feel safe, they do better. They learn faster. They're more likely to win. And it's becoming more acceptable rather than the old school. I remember my dad yelling at me, "Get up! You're not an athlete unless you can live with pain." You know, and that was that you didn't get any support or compassion. Yeah, so I think we're just recognizing that it's valid and it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you can push through some of that lactic acid burn while you're running up a hill. There's some difference, but like running on a broken leg, not so much. There's some certain things, right? It's like you wouldn't expect someone to play a full game with a huge concussion, right? And mental health is similar. Like you can't see a concussion. You can see the results of a concussion. So it's similar. Your brain is injured, but in a different way.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think some professional athletes over the last few years have really brought that to light by taking a break and not competing. And I think that's really important. It's the stigma that needs to be broken. And there's some inroads starting to be made with that.
Yeah. And it helps prevent burnout too, right? If everyone has proper coping mechanisms and ways to recharge and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you could change one thing about hockey culture today, what would it be?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I would say I would go back to the answer of youth voice. I think if we could have a lot more youth participating in the discussions, I think we would see a big culture shift happen.
I agree.
Yeah, some peer support groups or something even that'd be good. How has starting this movement changed your own view of the hockey world?
It has made me feel really hopeful. Because of the responses and because of the different perspective that I'm trying to bring to it. So it's not the positive psychology, let's stop bullying, though those can be valid. It's really trying to look at it from a common sense, realistic approach.
Yeah.
So for me, that makes me really hopeful that then we can have some really common sense, realistic solutions, and then they would stick.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Yeah.
What advice do you have for kids who are being bullied right now on or off the ice?
Right now, I would say don't hold on to the hurt. So that means talking to somebody who's safe, finding, I always with youth who have a cell phone, I tell them 686868 is the kid's help phone number. You can text them 24/7. You'll have a real person on the other line. It's confidential and anonymous. And the key with being bullied is making sure that you're not holding on to that hurt and having that safe place. And then looking at the other piece that's super important is that it isn't your story. So how do we change that? Mm-hmm. Because when a child is bullied, they start to internalize it and think that that's a reflection of who they truly are.
Yeah. That's super important.
And that's one of the key things, whether it's counseling or growth mindset or mindfulness or anything like that. That is a key feature, is that you want to replace that narrative of whatever the bullying or the comments or the actions have caused, and replace it with what's true for that child's core beliefs. That's positive and not reflective of what's happened with the bullying.
Yeah, that's so important, because what somebody is saying about you is not true. That is not you. That's not about you. That's not your story.
With my kids, I've used the hurt people will hurt people, hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are bullying you or making comments or saying something about you, it's often a reflection of how they feel about themselves.
Yeah. It's typically not about you, right? Those comments aren't even typically about you, which it's not trying to take away from their pain, but they need to know it's not about them, and we need to make them feel safe and know that those shouldn't make them feel that way about themselves, right? Yeah.
And I think one of the key things is looking at protective factors in the child's life. So what can you build on? So safe friends that are supportive and positive, recognizing that there are some people who aren't safe and you need to stay away from them. And I say what other people think about you is none of your business. But then actually being able to internalize that and act on that for a child is difficult. They, depending on what age they're at, they really need that support and different ways of guiding them through that and navigating that.
Yeah, I think that's
just listening.
A lot of adults to even understand.
And just listening, because so often, I did that. I said the platitudes of just walk away and it's not you, it's them, over, maybe on a one-time situation that works. Positive psychology can work, but then, depending on the child and the context, we need to do a little bit more work with them.
Yeah. And really making the children feel confident is what actually combats bullying, right? Because when they're confident in themselves, when you're confident in yourself as an adult, you're less susceptible to the bullying, right?
True.
And so really finding ways to build up the confidence in each child will help make them more resilient.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so finding the tools and the resources and the ways to help them feel confident. And yes, feeling safe is a huge part of that, but focusing on all their positive attributes and helping them see those from your perspective or from their own perspective, and seeing that, building up that confidence. And sports has such a great ability to build confidence in children. So yes, bullying can be a huge part of sports, but the confidence can be such an amazing part of the sport. And so trying to harness the confidence they can gain from the sport, I think can combat that bullying so much if we can just focus on building confidence in children.
Yes. Yeah, I love that, because the focus needs to be on that, the confidence. When we focus on the trauma or the situation too much, we're just reinforcing those mental pathways and trying to smooth those over and replace them with new ones is really the challenge.
Yeah. And I will say that I've only learned that from my own issues, right? Like from my own self-awareness and anxiety and stuff, that realizing once I became more confident with myself, I gave less crap about what anyone else thought of me, because that is their problem.
Less pucks to give.
Less pucks are given.
I love it.
Zero puck, right? And it helps me build a wall towards the pucks being chucked at me. How much pucks can a woodchuck
Oh my
puck?
goodness.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, it's too much. But yeah, no, like, I mean, building my own self-confidence helped me realize how much I just wish I had it as a child,
Mm-hmm.
right? And trying to reinforce that in my own children. It is hard, but it is possible. As almost a preventative measure, and trying to work on that now before you see signs of bullying is just as important as
Absolutely.
recognizing bullying and trying to focus on. And I don't mean turning your child into an egotistical maniac. I mean, like, teaching them how to be confident in themselves and who they are as a person
Absolutely.
without having to make everyone feel bad around them.
Well, and isn't that what team sports ultimately does, is it gives
Mhm.
kids the skills for later in life, and recognizing life isn't always fair. You're not always going to get the same ice
Exactly.
time or the same salary or
Yeah.
the same opportunities as everybody else. And so these are skills that we're building into them, and that's what the wonderful thing about team sports.
Yeah. And to reinforce that for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what? You're not always going to like your teammate. You're not always going to
Mhm.
like your coworker. You're not going to like what your boss says or your coach says all the time. But you're going to have to deal with these, and these are good ways to do it, right? Sometimes as a parent, we just want to hug them and tell them it's okay and it's the other person's fault, or and it's so easy to want to protect our children, and sometimes just trying to think of it, okay, if I was at work, how would I deal with this in a real world situation? And they're kids, so I know it's hard, but sometimes that perspective is what helps them become stronger
Mhm.
rather than us just wanting to fix it for them.
Well, and they, when you think about the physical part of it, and they have to push themselves to their limits and beyond sometimes, they're
Yeah.
doing that power skating and they don't want to
Yeah.
do it, but they put that extra, spin on it, or that positive
Mm-hmm.
outlook in it, and they get that extra strength. And I think if we can relate it or use those metaphors or analogies with kids when it comes to the mental toughness, we're really setting them up for success, not only in hockey, but in life.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. I get so passionate about that.
I love it.
I do. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, I just get so passionate and then I forget where I am and what I'm asking. And I went completely off topic. I railroaded your episode. I'm sorry. I totally forgot.
You
You
have, no,
pointed.
I've really enjoyed this. I don't,
Oh, good. What would you say to a parent who suspects their child is being bullied in hockey?
absolutely talk to them. And then if, you know, they're not ready to talk, try and find those spaces where you can just listen. And I find, like, I'll ask my son what happened today right after school, and he really won't say anything, but it's that time right before bed
Mm.
when we're like getting things ready and he's laying down, and all of a sudden it'll come out what happened that day, because that something's going on, but also not, like I said, not putting too much attention towards it until they're ready. Forcing them into therapy, that sort of thing, is not going to be a solution
Yeah.
if it could just exasperate the situation. A lot of kids are scared. They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get people in trouble,
Mhm.
especially with adults. So the authority figures, they don't want to tell on people.
Mm-hmm.
There's some of that within, I don't know if I'm generalizing now, but male culture,
Mm-hmm.
you don't tell on each other.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors involved, but really, and ultimately, I think parents need to take care of themselves. So really do a lot of self-reflection, and even though you're panicked and you're worried about your child,
Yeah.
really take care of yourself, and make sure that you're practicing some of the techniques or strategies you need in order to deal with this objectively.
Yeah.
And then get to know your association's policies really well. And if you find out they're not very good because they're not protecting the kids, then become an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Hockey Canada has a third-party complaint system in place. So
Okay.
that's always an option for all parents. And ultimately, that should be advertised on every association's website that's available. So there's a lot of different pathways to dealing with it. And ultimately, just keeping your child safe and feeling protected and safe, and knowing that it's not their fault, because they'll often think that there's something wrong with them, that they caused it, and just replacing those stories that they're telling themselves,
Mm-hmm.
whatever ways work, is really important.
What's one word that you would use to describe your mission for puck off the bullying?
And I can't use the word puck, right?
Yeah. That's yeah.
Well, I've said youth voice, but I would say leadership. let's use that one. Absolutely.
Yeah. What's the most powerful thing someone said to you since you launched?
I wouldn't say it's what they said. I would say it's how they looked when I talked to them about it. A lot of times I'm bringing it up because I'm in a hockey arena and parents are talking, and I'll say, here's some resources. It's something, and it's the look on their face, and it's that, it's that hurt that they're hurting for their child. And, a little bit of hope and a little bit of relief that they're not alone.
Yeah. Awesome.
So normally I would ask who you would pick if you could talk to a professional athlete in any sport or their mom. But in this case, I'd like to know who your dream guest or collaborator for Puck Off to Bullying would be.
My dream, well, I think I mentioned it would be Hockey Canada and the provincial governing bodies. That would be amazing.
That would be.
Looking at what the solutions are. They have limited capacity to govern over the boards that they're overseeing. So what are some of the solutions that we could work on as a community, as a hockey community? That would be fantastic. And of course, leaders where, saying puck off to bullying, really ideally, on the TikTok, I put a example of a puck off to bullying challenge. So
nice.
My son was in playoffs, and it was the second game of the playoffs, and he skated over to the other team's goalie and started stretching with him. And when I noticed, I was so surprised, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I'm videotaping it, and then another player from the other team skated up, and I thought, oh, for sure, he's telling him, you can't do that here.
Yeah.
And no, he was asking my son about the back injury he had in the other game. And then I thought, this is true leadership. This is true role modeling. We often talk about the negative things happening because there is a lot of hurt and there's a lot of unmet expectations and all that sort of thing. But we really need to highlight the positives out there, the kids that are having fun, the coaches that are doing amazing work, the refs out there, sweating it out and getting yelled at a lot more than anybody. So that's my hope, is that we're dealing with some really serious and sensitive issues, but at the same time, we need to celebrate the good things that are going on out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of good things going on out there too, right? And there are a lot of kids that will support other kids too, and it's nice to see. So
it's
like
brilliant.
when they dance together.
I like when they dance
Mike
together.
Said the dancing.
Yeah,
the dancing together,
That's
and
cool.
I love it.
I took a video at one of my son's games because the Zamboni ran out of fuel mid ice, and then they wrecked the ice, and so we're waiting to see if we could play the game or not. And the goalie from each team were literally just playing past at center ice.
That's awesome.
Because they're like, wow, we don't know if we're gonna. So I'm like, okay, well, at least they're passing. Somebody's having fun. I was so entertained by the goalie from each team. They're just sitting there playing pass with their massive goalie sticks, and I'm like, and then they started throwing the stick, batting it in the air, like baseball almost. I'm like, this is even more fun right now. They're playing catch. Awesome. So yeah,
I love that. There's a delay. You could get angry, or you could.
Yeah. Nope. They were just the other ones were in the dressing room, but nope, these goalies decided to just take full advantage of the fact that they don't normally get to hang out and play pass in the center of the ice. So they were, So I called them my mid-game entertainment, but it was great. It was great to see, and there's a lot of moments like that happen all the time, and
it's true.
And
it's
focusing
true.
on the good things and focusing on the positive is good. Is to remind them why they're in it. So
that's great.
Yeah. What is your go-to hype song when you need a boat?
Right now, it's definitely Abel Hart.
Okay.
Nice. It keeps coming up on my TikTok feed, and and then I was singing it to my son who had a tryout weekend, and he would say, Mom, and then by the end of the weekend, he'd say, sing the song. And then I was mad, I think a week later, and he started singing it to me and made me laugh. So, yeah. So it works.
They're always listening.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, Lindy. It was nice to meet you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
And before we finish up, I will put all of your info and links and stuff in the show notes, just so people know where to find you. I
Sounds
just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. So check that out. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great.
Yeah, www.puckofftoBullying.com.
And again, I'm totally going to put a link in my resources pages on my website as well.
Thanks.
So Yeah. Until next week, friends, stay loud, stay proud, stand up for yourself, and stay awesome. Thanks for tuning in today, and we appreciate you listening. Catch us next week for another mix of hockey tales, tricks, and/or tips.